I wasn't sold. I was loaned, like a collector's edition with a stamp on the spine, except I breathe and I think too loudly. Rain slicked the city into a smear of gray and neon as the car rolled to a stop before the Vane estate. Flags hung from black iron poles, heavy with water and authority. The gates parted for us, like a jaw unlocking. I counted my breath to 4 the way my mother taught me. Inhale dignity, exhale panic, and stepped out into the kind of cold that smells like wet stone and old money. Inside, the marble hall did what marble halls do, told stories about power without saying a word. Gothic windows cut the afternoon into cathedral stripes. The air carried a careful blend of oak and leather with a whisper of something that felt like altitude. I could taste the hierarchy on my tongue. "Smile," murmured the envoy from my clan, his hand polite at my elbow. "Remember." Guest. Translation. Collateral. I smiled. The hall didn't smile back. He announced me in a voice that echoed, "Liam of the Independent Line, here under the year accord." We waited. Even the chandeliers seemed to wait. Somewhere, a clock clicked like a careful rifle. Then the man descended. Marcus Vane didn't hurry. He didn't have to. He came down the staircase with the measured calm of a predator that never needed to run. Broad-shouldered, tall enough to make the steps look smaller beneath him. Dark hair combed with the same exactness as his thoughts, if he kept. Thoughts. Steel-gray eyes that evaluated the way cold does, impartially. Thoroughly, as if the weather itself had decided to possess a face. A black suit, tailored the way rules are, closely. "Welcome," he said, and the word landed like a coin. Liam. He used my name well. Too well. I inclined my head just enough to be polite, and just not enough to be obedient. "Mr. Vane." His gaze skimmed me once, then returned to fix like a hand on my throat. He approached, no pretense, no shy curve to his path, until the distance between us had an aftertaste. I could feel his heat in the cold hall. I could feel the way his presence hummed against the fine hairs at the back of my neck, as if my instincts had a tuning fork he could strike at will. The envoy cleared his throat and recited the terms. 1 year of residence, comportment, that befits the accord, access to the estate, but not the city without escort. I catalogued each rule, not to obey it, but to know precisely what to break and when. It's a hobby, like chess, or arson. Vane didn't look at the envoy while he spoke. He looked at me. "You understand your position." He said it without a question mark. "I do," I replied. "Loaned, not owned." I let the corner of my mouth lift. I promised to avoid dog-earing the pages. Something like surprise ghosted over his features. Not much, just the smallest tilt where amusement might someday live if he ever let it. "You're not what I expected." "That's mutual." Silence, sharp and beautiful. The envoy shifted. In the next beat, Vane stepped closer, as if the hall itself required a demonstration of his radius. He wasn't touching me. He didn't need to. But the thread of air between us pulled taut. My pulse tried very hard to be dramatic. I made it sit. He studied me the way buyers study flawed art they can't stop staring at. Not cruel, worse. Curious. It felt like being filed. "Your quarters are prepared," he said at last, melody clipped, consonants clean. "Finian will show you." At the name, a figure materialized near a column with the casual grace of someone who makes an art of being everywhere and nowhere at once. Finian, apparently, had been listening. He had a smile built for trouble, and the kind of eyes that promised you a secret and delivered too. Slightly taller than me, lean, dressed in soft charcoal that avoided the sharp edges Vane preferred. "Call me Finny," he said, offering a small bow with an irreverence that felt like sunlight. "Welcome to the museum. Please don't touch the exhibits unless the exhibits touch first." "Finny," Vane said without turning. It wasn't a warning so much as a leash being lifted, so the dog would remember it existed. Finny only widened his smile. as the alpha decrees. Come along, Liam. I went, because there was nothing else to do that wouldn't be theater or surrender. My clan's envoy peeled away with relief that smelled like paper burned to ash. Finney led me through a warren of corridors that pretended to be less guarded than they were. The walls held the kind of art that tells you people don't worry about food or war, because their wars are different and their food is guaranteed. Do you always meet the boss in a cathedral to intimidation? I asked. Finney's mouth curved, only when he wants the room to do half the talking. And the other half? He does with his eyes. It's efficient. Also, expensive. He glanced at me sideways as we turned a corner. So Liam. Independent lineage. He made it sound like a cocktail. How are you at breakfasts at 7, silence at 9, and don't get yourself kidnapped at all times? I'm inconsistent, I said. Also inconvenient. Excellent, Finney replied. He collects those. The room they'd assigned me was generous enough to pass for kindness. High ceilings, tall windows with security film you'd only notice if you... They've known cages, a bed dressed in white as if innocence were a textile. On the wall, a camera winked like a blunt confession. The smell here was softer. Linen, lemon oil, the faint trace of a recent fire in the hearth. I walked to the window and pressed my palm to the cool glass. The city beyond wore its rain like armor. The estate grounds below were all trimmed hedges and the geometry of wealth. I tried to imagine a year measured by someone else's clock. The imagination resisted. Finney hovered in the doorway, which I appreciated. People who don't cross thresholds until invited tend to understand thresholds. I should ask, he said, tone light enough to float, if you prefer your sense of humor with tea or coffee. It's customary here to medicate. Tea, I said. But I drink coffee when I want to make enemies. He pretended to write it down in the air with an invisible pen. Noted. House rules are posted in the kitchen, but I can give you the gist. He's a structure addict, he will. Test your oxygen levels with a glance, and he doesn't like surprises unless he made them himself. A beat. Do you bite? Only if someone mistakes me for furniture. He grinned. Oh, you'll do. He was almost out the door when he added, with a glance pitched perfectly between mischief and warning, don't let the marbles spook you. It's only money trying very hard to be timeless. Lunch is at 1. Try not to stage a rebellion before dessert. It makes the staff nervous. When he left, the room deepened. I unpacked the way people light candles in a storm, slowly, with stubborn hands. A few books, a sweater that remembered my mother's laundry soap, the thin silver pendant my father gave me when I was 12, and too clever for safety. I tucked what mattered under the mattress with the apology of someone who hated being sentimental, and did it anyway. I told myself I wasn't afraid. I told myself I was a guest. Both were lies of different flavors. What I was watched. The camera's red dot didn't blink, but it sent the weight of attention across the room, like a shadow knows it's night. I sat on the edge of the bed and counted my breaths again. Inhale, pride. Exhale, surrender. No, that one stuck in my throat. Try again. Exhale. Strategy. Better. The knock was soft the way fists are before they learn violence. I rose. When I opened the door, he was there. Marcus Vane didn't lean in doorways. He occupied them. The hallway light threw a pale bar across his cheekbone, turning his face into angles and patience. Settling in, he said, declarative again. I've decided which drawer will insult me the least, I said. It's the middle one. A fractional nod, as if this was a perfectly reasonable assessment. His gaze drifted past my shoulder, taking in window, bed, camera, me. He stepped in without asking. The room shrank by choice. He moved closer than anyone who didn't own at least part of me should have. My chest stuttered. I let my chin rise half an inch, enough to meet his eyes without apology. They weren't cold, I realized. Just calibrated. Understand this, Liam, he said softly. almost conversationally. You're here under my protection. That includes protection from yourself. I've managed myself for 26 years, I replied. I'm surprisingly survivable. His mouth considered a smile and dismissed it. I wasn't referring to survival. He let the sentence sit between us until it grew meanings. Then he leaned in, not touching, not even brushing, simply settling. His breath close enough that mine had to decide whether to match it. The alpha hum under his skin rose, a frequency I refused to tune to. The part of me that didn't care about parts of me wanted to close the distance and take something I couldn't name. I retreated exactly one step. Your house is lovely. Your rules will be entertaining. I won't be a problem, Mr. Vane, unless your definition of problem includes independent thought. It does, he said. Frequently. Then we're both in trouble. We looked at each other for the length of a heartbeat and another. I kept mine even. He kept his unguessable. You're not what I expected, he said again, as if repeating it might make me alter to fit the expectation. That's mutual. He glanced up at the camera, brief, unbothered, and back to me. Finian will see to anything you need. Dinner at 7. Don't leave the estate without clearing it. I adore invitations disguised as orders. He turned to go, paused in the doorway, and said almost idly, I don't keep things I can't use, Liam. Find a way to be useful. I smiled without teeth. I'm very good at being inconvenient to people who underestimate me. It's a public service. For a moment, the air sharpened. Then he left, the door closing on the quiet. I crossed to the window again. Rain needled the glass. Headlights combed the drive. Somewhere in the house, footsteps measured their way through an evening that would not belong to me. Yet, no bars, no chains, only a gaze heavier than any lock. The rules arrived at dawn, tucked under my door like a polite threat. Printed on cream stock with the Vane crest ghosted behind the text, they read like a minimalist manifesto, breakfast at 7. Silence in the East Wing after 9. No guests. No leaving the grounds without escort, no access to the armory, which I underlined in pencil purely for future irony. Maintain appropriate comportment at all times. I took the paper to the kitchen and set it on the marble, like a specimen. The kitchen was technically warm, copper pans, fresh bread, the hiss of something civil on the stove, but the emptiness made it colder. The staff kept moving in loops of efficiency that avoided the chair at the end of the table. Marcus's chair. He wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He took breakfast alone the way some people take communion, early, exact, and not up for discussion. Tea? A young cook asked, eyes flicking to the rules in a way as if they might stain. Coffee, I said, purely to see who flinched. 3 people flinched. Black, I added sweetly, and pulled down a glass jar from the very top shelf, the one labeled preserves, in a handwriting that could only belong to someone who had never preserved anything but silence. I moved it 3 inches to the left and traded 2 cups to different hooks. I opened a drawer and rearranged the spoons from smallest to largest because they'd been arranged largest to smallest, and that felt like a dare. By the time I was halfway through my cup, a maid was visibly breathing into a paper bag with her eyes. The head steward appeared like a storm cloud in a tailored vest and Finian slid in behind him, hands in pockets, smile already drafted. You're awake, Finny said, as if this explained everything and nothing. He looked at the rules, then at the top shelf, then at the spoons, then at me. The smile sharpened. Are you trying to die beautifully? I prefer to die late, I said. With all my jewelry on. The steward coughed, which in his dialect meant, please stop rearranging the cosmos. Mr. Vane takes breakfast at 7, he informed me. It is now 7:12. Then I'm fashionably late to his absence, I said, and took another sip. The coffee was excellent, which annoyed me out of principle. Mr. Vane prefers the house to run on time, the steward persisted. I prefer the house not to presume it knows my pulse. I smiled politely, like a man at a funeral who knows the deceased wasn't a saint. We'll both be disappointed today. Finney leaned against the doorframe and stage whispered, "He's going to love you and/or relocate you to the guest cottage with the bad water pressure." "I'll knit," I said. "You don't knit. I'll learn out of spite." At 7:15, a footfall in the hallway rearranged the room's gravity. Conversations pinched closed. Even the kettle looked guilty. Marcus entered without ceremony, sleeves rolled to the exact point where forearm becomes. Language, a dark watch riding his wrist like the time itself, had chosen a side. He took in the scene in a single glance. Me in his kitchen. Rules. On the table, spoons traitorous, staff either devoted or terrified. His gaze returned to me with the weight of a verdict and the curiosity of a scientist who has just discovered his lab mouse knows advanced calculus. "Good morning," he said. "Is it?" I asked and sipped. He looked at the coffee. "You don't take tea." "I take victories," I said. This was available. The smallest pause. "Join me after you're finished." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room swallowed and the staff evaporated. Finney mouthed, "Don't die," and sauntered off, humming a waltz that might have been written for executions. The inner courtyard bled a gray light into the corridor as I followed Marcus. Rain pearl-beaded the fountain, dripping from a stone wolf's muzzle in a rhythm that felt like a countdown. He didn't speak. He didn't slow. His stride was calibrated to a tempo people adjusted to or tripped over. I adjusted. I don't trip, not when people are looking. His study was 2 rooms deep, and the kind of tidy that suggests a long-term love affair with control. Shelves held the heavy opinions of dead men. A stained glass window climbed behind the desk, slices of amber and ocean blue casting quiet geography across the floor. He took his place, as if the room put him there. "Close the door," he said. It closed. I didn't. I crossed to the window, letting the colored light tattoo my shirt. The glass showed a hunting scene, wolves and stags, all of them mythic, none of them bleeding. It was a choice. "You received the rules," Marcus said. I did. I added footnotes. Very democratic of me. Democracy is inefficient. So is obedience when it's unearned. He folded his hands, and the line of his knuckles looked like the architecture the house was trying to imitate. "You're testing how far you can go? And you, how far you'll allow?" I let the question purr. "It's mutually educational." He watched me, and in the watching there was not just the habit of command, but a flicker of something more alive. Interest's first cousin, Azar. No, that would be giving him too much. But the voice he used next carried a thread of it. "Boundaries exist for reasons," he said. "So do rivers," I replied, "and they still flood." "Then you'll find the levees," he said, "one by one. Or I'll find the ocean." We stood inside the colored breath of the window, and the air between us gathered heat. His scent, under the clean blade of aftershave and wool, shifted, subtle, the way thunderheads change the pressure before you hear them. Not fear, not exactly. Alertness sharpened into something that recognized a threat and couldn't name it without losing ground. He felt it too. The alpha in him, civilized into cufflinks and appointments, leaned toward the instinct that said, "Dangerous." Mine tried to lean back. I made it sit. "You're not here to be difficult," he said finally, as if he'd misread the label on a bottle and was reluctant to correct it. "I'm here because my clan miscalculated, and you do math with people." I smiled without showing teeth. "Difficult is complimentary compared to what I could be." He rose, the chair's leather whisper soft, with the window light at his shoulder. He looked less like law and more like the man who invented it. He came closer, and the part of the room that believed in oxygen started counting. "Understand me," he said. The words were cool water poured carefully, not a splash. "I will keep order. I will keep you safe. I will keep my side of the accord." You will not make that harder than it needs to be. The hum under my skin wanted to answer in kind, to launch something reckless and watch it land. Instead, I tilted my head, letting the amber spill across my throat. Safety without freedom is a glass coffin, beautiful, airless. Freedom without structure is a cliff, he said. I have good ankles. A muscle in his jaw considered smiling and chose discipline. You will eat at 7. I will eat when I'm hungry. You will not leave the grounds without escort. I will not be followed into the bathroom. Color-fractured light flickered over his face as the clouds thinned. He stepped closer, close enough that if I breathed too deeply, the story would change. The scent shift rolled again, that thin metallic note, like the song a blade makes in your imagination. He masked it quickly, but not before I saw the tell. Pupils narrowing, a focus that tightened, the body taking inventory without permission. He wasn't scared of me. He was calibrating me, and something in that calibration registered an equation he didn't expect. You're not like other omegas, he said, low, with no contempt at all. Only fact. Congratulations, I said. You've discovered a minority within a minority. Do I get a parade? No. The word held too many possibilities for a single syllable. He let his gaze break from mine first. Not a retreat, just a tactical pivot toward the desk. You're dismissed. I stayed a breath longer than polite. Then I went, because victory doesn't always look like a crown. Sometimes it looks like walking away without looking back. In the courtyard, rain had softened to a mist that didn't so much fall as decide the air needed texture. Finney appeared from behind the fountain like a stage cue, eyebrows up, mouth already forming a question he'd make sound like a joke. Well? He asked, falling into step beside me. Are we knitting in the guest cottage yet? He doesn't knit, I said. He folds storms into squares and files them. Adorable, Finney said. And your immediate plan? Lunch, I said. Then I'm going to put the salt on the opposite side of the stove and see who cries. He pressed a hand to his heart. Artistry. Back in my room, I stood at the window and watched a pair of crows test the wind over the hedges. My reflection looked more sure than I felt, which was an accomplishment. I touched the rules again and folded them into a ship, set it on the mantel, and imagined it sailing out of the house and into the mouth of a bonfire. He wanted me to bend. I wanted to see him blink first. The library became my observation deck. High-ceilinged and cathedral quiet, it smelled of dust, leather, and disciplined thought. Ladders rolled along iron rails, and the sunlight arrived in tall, obedient rectangles. In the morning, the staff moved through here on the way to other rooms. Efficient, deferential, orbiting gravity I was still measuring. I learned the rhythm quickly. The head steward passed at 9:05 to dust a desk already clean. A guard paused at the second window at 9:12 to check the angle to the front gate. Finney drifted at unpredictable intervals and made them look like choreography. Marcus didn't enter before noon, and when he did, he crossed the room like a metronome set to the tempo of inevitability. Studying? Finney asked one day, finding me halfway up a ladder with a book on treaties I had no intention of finishing. Breathing, I said. It seems to be allowed in this wing. You say that like a man who plans to do something with the oxygen. I plan to return it, improved. He rested his chin on his knuckles. Utterly unhelpful. Try not to rearrange the constellations. The boss gets peevish when Orion migrates. Peevish, I repeated. We wouldn't want that. I tested the edges anyway. A paperweight migrated from the right corner of the desk to the left. A decanter turned 7 degrees. In the East Hall, I swapped 2 identical, only not identical, vases. In the morning, they reappeared where they'd been, silent as a correction on a report card, seen, noted, returned. The second day, I flipped the spoons again. The third day, I stopped before I touched anything, and simply stood in each room long enough to leave an absence of silence behind. By afternoon, I felt watched in a way that had nothing to do with cameras. At dusk, Finney found me on the balcony above the receiving hall, the city bleeding gold at the edges. Below, staff arranged silver and flowers and the geometry of expectation for an evening that would not happen. No guests tonight, just the ritual of readiness. "He wants dinner," Finney said, lacing his fingers through the railing. "With you, peace talks? Brand management?" he said cheerfully. "Do say yes. The chef has made something that once aspired to be a bird." "Where?" "The small dining room. Candles will be involved." I pretended to consider I'd already decided. "Tell him I'll be there." The room was the kind of intimate that required deliberate restraint. Black wood, linen white. Enough to scare stains. A painting of winter trees that made the candles feel like a promise. Marcus stood at the head of the table when I entered. Jacket off, shirt sleeves precise. He didn't greet me with a smile. He greeted me with the suggestion of one, which was worse. Liam. My name fit in his mouth like a coin balanced on an edge. "Sit." "I'll stand for a second," I said, crossing to the window. The night pressed its forehead to the glass. "To appreciate your restraint. Only 6 knives per setting. They're adequate," he said, and came to the sideboard. "Wine, please." "I like to be a little more beautiful around my enemies. Try a different metaphor," he said, and poured. "I'm not your enemy." "Not tonight," I agreed. "Tonight, you're a test I intend to pass." He handed me a glass. My fingers brushed his, an insignificant contact, a social accident. The room did not agree. Heat skated up my wrist. Something in my pulse stitched faster, then stabilized out of spite. His inhale abbreviated. The alpha thrum at the base of his throat deepened, like a note held too long. He withdrew half a step, not retreat, calculation. "Careful," I said lightly. "You'll ruin your reputation for perfect composure. Only if it actually breaks," he said. And it hasn't. We sat. The first course arrived. Pale fish under a brightness of citrus, something green that tasted like a logical argument. We ate in a silence that wasn't empty. It was occupied by all the questions neither of us would ask first. "You're not a man who waits for the end of a contract," he said finally, as if reading a sentence he'd edited himself. "I'm not a man who waits," I said. "I act." The corner of his mouth tilted. "So I've noticed. Have you? I thought perhaps your staff noticed for you and filed memos in triplicate." "They do," he said. "But I noticed before they did." It should have sounded like a claim. It sounded like an admission. We fenced softly for a while. Weather as politics, the city as a beast that needed feeding, the way the house liked its mourning the way people like their saints, immaculate and unverifiable. He asked about my studies. I asked about his investments. We told each other almost nothing, and learned a great deal. "Why the theater?" I asked at one point, tipping my chin toward the candles. We could have done this at the kitchen table at 7 a.m., over burnt toast and rules. He took a measured sip. "The kitchen table at 7 a.m. is for obedience. This is for choices. And what choices are those? Whether we spend a year in a war I can win and dislike, or in a truce that might improve us both." I let that sit. The wine was excellent, dark, fruit with edges, a finish that corrected your posture. When he reached to refill my glass, our hands found the same stem again. Not an accident, this time. The smallest pause widened between contact and retreat. The air noticed. So did the part of me I keep behind a door with 3 locks. Everything is theater, I thought. But strangely, I don't want the curtain. His gaze flicked up, fast enough to catch the thought as it moved across my face. The candles made his eyes look like something molten had learned discipline. His scent shifted that hair's breadth again. A metallic thread, a storm rehearsing. I watched him master it, as if he were smoothing a sheet. "You're unsettling the staff," he said. It was not a complaint. It was almost praise. I'm teaching them to see, I said. That the house's pulse isn't the only one that matters. Mine is, he said. Here, it is. Then teach me the rhythm, I replied, calm as a blade on velvet. I'll decide if it's worth dancing to. That earned me a quiet, impossible thing. Amusement warming like coals. He reached for the decanter, and his knuckles grazed my sleeve. I didn't move away. Neither did he. Our proximity wrote a thesis. The room politely refused to read aloud. We didn't talk about the city's council, or the old grudges layered like wallpaper in the older houses. We didn't talk about my clan's short-sighted bargain. We spoke instead in negotiations disguised as anecdotes, in compliments wearing other people's clothes. Later, on the balcony that opened from the receiving hall, the city laid itself out, wet rooftops, neon wounds, a train stitching light into the distance. We stood with a space between us that a person could survive or ruin themselves by crossing. You enjoy moving things, he said, without looking at me. I enjoy proving they can be moved, I said. Even the ones that swear they can't. And what will you do when you find something that doesn't move? Call it a mountain, I said. Then learn its paths. He exhaled. Not laughter, not a sigh. The night carried the sound away and brought back the smell of rain and cut stone. He turned his head then, and the study of me was not predatory and not gentle, it was exact. You are a problem, he said, almost privately. I'm a solution you didn't know you needed, I said back, precisely as private. We went inside without touching. He walked me to the corridor outside the small dining room. It would have been chivalry in another house. Here, it was an equation written to see if I could read it. Good night, Liam. Good night, Mr. Vane. I left first. I didn't look back. I felt his gaze anyway, heavier than locks, lighter than mercy, following the geometry. Of my shoulders, the tilt of my head, the way I didn't quicken my step. Somewhere behind me, whether said aloud or only thought I couldn't know. His look translated into a truth I'd already smelled in the air between us. An omega that smells like freedom is the worst temptation. Trouble doesn't knock in this house. It breezes in wearing a suit. I heard the scuffle before I saw it. Boots scudding on wet stone, a hissed curse, the metallic gasp of a gate half closed too late. The inner courtyard was a shallow bowl of rain and fountain light. The wolf, statue, spitting silver threads into a pool that had learned patience. 2 guards were hauling a third between them, his weight slung awkwardly, dark blooming through darker cloth at his ribs. I'd been walking the arcade to exhaust a restlessness that didn't want to be named. Rule said, don't interfere. Instinct said, interfere creatively. Set him here, I said, already dragging a wrought iron chair out from the table under the arcade. The guards hesitated. House protocol is a religion, and the wounded man groaned in a way that made the decision for them. He sagged into the chair. Rain had slicked his hair to his skull. His lips were colorless and his pupils too bright. What happened? I asked, tugging his jacket open. My fingers came away, red and rain-diluted. The cut wasn't elegant. It was the kind of slash you earn by turning too slow. Knife? Fence, one guard said. Spiked. He swallowed. We were patrolling the east side. Less biography, more pressure, I said, snatching the guard's scarf and pressing it to the wound. The injured one sucked air through his teeth. Sorry, I added automatically, and then, because sorry rarely helps, good. It means you're not a ghost. Should call the medic, the other guard muttered. By all means call, I said, and while the phone completes its existential journey, we'll keep him from bleeding into your master's tile. I peeled off my own jacket and shoved it under the man's back to level him. The rain had drifted inward as mist. It felt like the air had decided to turn to water. I scanned automatically. Entry point, depth, trajectory. Not arterial. Lucky by an inch. Hold this, I told the second guard, planting his palm on the scarf. Don't ease up, unless you want a promotion to pallbearer. Finney appeared as if conjured with a stage whisper. And here I was, hoping for a quiet evening of alphabetizing liquor, he said, eyes bright with concern that he smuggled in under humor. He knelt beside me, his sleeves already rolled. What do you need? Boiled water, clean cloths, tape, scissors, I said, and if you bring the good brandy, I'll pretend it was for disinfecting. I'll bring 2, he said, and vanished again with speed that implied practice. Somewhere above us, second-floor balcony, west corner, the slightest shift of weight. I didn't look up. I didn't have to. The attention had a signature. The air in the courtyard consented to be observed. Stay with me, I told the injured guard, meeting his eyes. Name? Rafe, he said, and flinched as the pressure tugged. Sir, don't sir me, I said. It makes me feel like furniture. I pressed the edges of the wound, testing. Shallow. Dirty, but shallow. Breathe in when I say, out when I say. Your job is to obey me for 5 minutes. After that, you can go back to obeying the man with the better suit. He huffed something like a laugh that hurt. Yes, Liam. Finney returned at a run with supplies and an apology to the universe. I swabbed and flushed, cut away ruined fabric, taped Rafe up as neatly as the circumstances allowed. He tried to be brave about it, which is the most tiring thing a body can do. I admired the effort and ignored it. Stitches? Finney asked. Not tonight, I said. Butterfly closures and a stern lecture. The medic can decide in the morning if my art offends. Your art calms me, he said. Is that allowed? No, I said. But do it anyway. Rafe's color crept back 1 shade. The mist peppered my neck. The fountain kept its own untroubled time. And above, still as a verdict, Marcus watched. I felt it when his attention narrowed, the way you feel thunder 2 beats before it decides what it wants to be. It didn't make me work faster. It didn't make me show off. I talked Rafe through 3 more breaths, secured the last strip, and pushed to my feet. You'll live, I told him, which is inconvenient if you owe anyone money. Thank you, he said, throat tight. Don't thank me, I said. Eat something with salt. Don't play near fences. I looked up then. The balcony was a black cut across the rain, backlit by the hallway lamp behind it. Marcus was a darker shape, set into the dark, a point of gravity. He didn't move, and I pretended not to see him. Finney nudged me with a shoulder. There will be speeches, he murmured, some of them silent. Silent speeches are my favorite, I said. They never get the metaphors wrong. The night slowed. The house returned to the performance of calm. Later, when the staff dispersed into the usual routines and Rafe was delivered to his bed with instructions and a threat, I found the veranda almost empty of weather. The rain had thinned to a whisper. Lamps cast small islands of gold on wood. The city beyond the hedge worked through its sins as if they were chores. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, looking not at the garden but at the line where the cloud bank broke apart. I joined him because leaving would have been more dramatic than I wanted to be. Is he stable? Marcus asked. Yes, I said. He'll fashion a scar and a story. Both will be embellished by morning. Good. The word had weight. Then, you disobeyed protocol. Yes. I leaned a hip against the rail. I also obeyed common sense. It and protocol are not on speaking terms. He looked at me sidelong, a glance with the strength of a pull. The veranda light cut his face into planes, cheekbone, mouth, the before and after of a thought he hadn't decided to have. He didn't come closer. He didn't need to. The space between us had learned our names. Tea? I asked, because I am either perverse or hospitable when I should be careful. I lifted the small tray Finney had left, 2 cups steaming like tidy ghosts. Marcus accepted one. Our fingers didn't touch. It still counted. We stood there, 2 silhouettes arranged by a patient god. Traffic hummed beyond the wall. Somewhere, a siren rehearsed regret. The fountain stitched water to water. I felt the quiet as a temperature. My clan, I said, because sometimes the door opens by itself, and you either step through or pretend you didn't see, didn't trade me for peace. He was very still. They traded me for silence, I said. Ask anyone who has lived with men who fear consequences. Silence buys them the illusion they've paid for peace. He didn't fill the air. The restraint was not stingy. It was careful. He sipped tea, like he was choosing not to speak into a wound. I could have refused, I went on. It would have cost us land or blood. We were already short of both. So I calculated. I am good at calculating when I am not the one who bleeds. I laughed softly. It didn't sound like humor. Surprise. This time I was... The rain thickened and then thinned again, a mood without conviction. When did you decide? He asked at last. When the map on my father's wall got more pins than notes, I said. When my mother started baking at midnight. When my elders stopped finishing their sentences. I put the cup down and wrapped my fingers around the rail because otherwise I might forget where to put my hands. You should know what you're housing. Not a gift. A debt someone else disguised. He didn't approach. He didn't claim. He let the words hang long enough to cool. Liam, he said finally. And the way he said my name was neither command nor consolation. It was an address that found the right door. He looked at me like a man looking at a painting he had misread, and suddenly saw. You did what you thought would keep your people from breaking. I did what I thought I could survive, I said. He nodded once. There was something like softness under the steel, not weakness, relief from a posture he didn't need to maintain here. He let silence do the thing words would have ruined. I stood in it, and didn't feel alone. We finished the tea. He carried the tray to the table himself, a small rebellion against the kind of man everyone presumed he was. When he left, it was with no flourish. The door whispered shut behind him, and the night exhaled as if someone had uncorked a bottle. I stayed until the rain forgot me, and the lamps grew halos. When I finally went in, the house didn't resist. It simply watched me pass, as if revising its notes. Morning pressed a white shoulder through the curtains. The courtyard smelled like wet stone and smug greenery. I found Finney in the pantry counting jars with theatrical despair. Good, he said, without looking up. You're alive. I owe the scullery maid 5 cookies. She said you would be. I bet you were a dramatic ghost by sunrise. I am always a dramatic ghost by sunrise, I said. It's my most flattering light. He closed the cabinet with a hip. Word is, the captain of the ice fleet stood with you on the veranda under active precipitation. That's almost a confession here. From me or from him. Yes, Finney said, and gave me a look that could fold paper. Try not to break him. He has to sign things. I took a slice of toast and didn't confess that something in me had already cracked. Very quietly. In a way you only hear when the room is otherwise silent. Later, when I crossed the hall outside his study, I felt, just for a flick, his attention brush me like a palm that didn't touch. I didn't turn, but in the echo of that almost contact, I could read the thought moving behind. His eyes, the way you read weather on a horizon you know too well. He's dangerous, not with his teeth, with his heart. It started as nothing. A slip of glass against skin, a ribbon of red that should have been ordinary. I nicked my palm on the lip of a tumbler in the library, while correcting the decanter's angle by 7 unrepentant degrees. The cut wasn't elegant. Neither was the sound I made. A small sound, swallowed by the shelves. I pressed my thumb to the sting and told my body to behave. Then the air changed. I felt it before I saw him. Pressure folding in, the room tightening as if a weather front had taken human shape. Marcus crossed the threshold without knocking, eyes narrowing in a way that didn't register concern so much as calculation sharpened by something older. The alpha hum under his skin rose like a tide. Glass, I said, too casual. It's my turn to bleed on your furniture. He stood too close, the way arrows stand too close to targets. The scent shift in him was unmistakable, even to a man who refused certain languages. A metallic note, bright and ancient, cut through the leather dust calm of the library. It wasn't about the wound. It was about what the wound said. Come, he said, quiet and unarguable. Now, I didn't move. I hate being handled like a problem whose solution someone already likes. But the look in his eyes wasn't ownership. It was alarm's cousin. I let him steer me, palm wrapped in a linen handkerchief he produced, as if etiquette had always been a tourniquet. We walked the marble corridor, like the floor might judge our footfalls. The lab sat behind a door that preferred numbers to names, silver, sterile, the opposite of the house's performative warmth. Light made no promises in here. Machines did. A medic in neat blues glanced up, then down to the red seeping through linen. She reached for antiseptic and gauze. Marcus's voice cut across the clinical hum. Run a panel. Alpha panel? She asked, already knowing and already startled by her own question. Yes, I'm fine, I said, because the lie was small and loyal. It's a scratch. It's information, he said. And I want it. The medic cleansed, bandaged, drew blood. The vials looked vulgar with their small, honest burden. Marcus didn't pace. He became still in the way statues remember they were once men. The results didn't take long. They never do when fate is bored and wants to move the plot. The medic's mouth flattened into a line that wasn't fear, exactly. Aw's distant relative. He shows markers, she said, eyes on the printout, voice on a wire. Alpha line, old, recessive activation, the signatures are rare. Marcus's gaze came to me like weather choosing a field. Old, he repeated, and the word tasted like history. On me, it tasted like trouble. Ancient line. I laughed, short enough to bruise. Congratulations, you've adopted an anomaly. The medic pretended to find something urgent for her hands. She left us with the hum of machines and the space where neutrality goes to die. Did you know? Marcus asked, soft as the click of a safety coming off. The answer tangled. I shook my head, then didn't. Truth isn't a coin, it's a glass that cuts both ways. I suspected I was inconvenient, I said, but I didn't know the genealogy wanted to get poetic. His jaw set. You knew enough to suspect, and if I had known for certain, I said, heat pushing past discretion, would you have preferred I arrived with a banner? Caution, difficult to own? Would you have told me? His voice didn't rise. It deepened. A low place in the river after rain, after everything. AFTEREVERYTHING. I let the echo spread. The lab's clean walls gave it back to me without distortion. After rules slid under doors and cameras blinked like confessed eyes, after you filed me under useful or decorative, and only later penciled in human? If I had known, Marcus, would I have told you, or would I have kept the only leverage the world ever handed me? We stared each other raw. The room had too much light for dignity. He took a breath that tried and failed to be calm. The alpha in him flexed, went to the window, though there was no window. Here, found the place instincts go when they're told to behave. You're not a weapon to me, he said, and I wanted to believe him until the rest of the sentence arrived without his permission. Unless you force me to see you as one. Something in me snapped quiet as ice breaking under night. Not loud. Final. You arranged my life to fit your structure, I said, and you expect gratitude because you made the edges smooth. His restraint cracked on a hairline I hadn't noticed until it widened. Not violence, not even volume. The fracture was old and private, a tectonic reminder that he too was a geography other people had mapped without consent. Understand me, he said, taking one step that halved the room. I did this to keep you safe. The council will smell this. The city will want to measure you with chains. I'm trying to keep you from becoming currency in other men's hands. And what am I in yours? My voice found a register I rarely use. Not cool, not kind. True. A project? A risk? A test of your ethics? His pupils tightened. The scent shift cut again. Metal, storm, oath. I felt the pull in my own blood, like a key near the locket matches. It was unbearable. It was undeniable. It was a language I refused and understood. Liam, he said. And the name was not a command, not a plea. An attempt to build a bridge with 4 letters. No, I said, and the refusal wasn't to him. It was to the gravity that kept insisting we were orbits, not men. Do not give me your protection like a leash, and call it mercy. I moved first. Maybe that's important. Maybe it's only honest. I crossed the small distance like I was stepping into weather I chose. He didn't retreat. My hand found the hard line of his shoulder. I meant to push. I meant to puncture the theater. To puncture something I couldn't name. Instead, I stood on the lip of something older than rules and leaned in. My mouth found the angle where jaw becomes promise. Not a kiss. Not surrender. Bite. Skin. Heat. The iron bloom of blood meeting air. His breath hitched. Mine broke. The world refocused around the point of contact like a camera deciding which truth to keep. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't a script. It was fury's bright sibling and despair's sharp one. I bit, as if I could answer every contract ever written with teeth. As if I could carve myself back out of the labels, out of the house, out of history. And then the floor moved. Not the literal floor. The one under language. The one where bonds are made or unmade. A flare behind the eyes. Images that didn't belong to mere imagination. A snowbound field lit by torches. Hands, ungloved, cupping blood as if it were light. Voices swearing something I couldn't translate because translation cheapens certain vows. A river in summer, reeds bent to eavesdrop, a mouth speaking mine and meaning equal. The taste of iron braided with rain. The ghost of a circle of standing stones that had learned to bow. It lasted a heartbeat. It lasted a century. I faltered, breath shuddering, the connection snapping back like a wire that had been pulled too tight. I realized my fingers had knotted in his shirt. I realized his hand was at the back of my neck, not forcing, not even guiding, only there, a recognition shaped like touch. His scent reeled, steadied, did the impossible, softened without getting weak. I let go. The mark I'd left reddened, then beaded, then steadied. The medic would have had a controlled, tactical panic. There was no medic. Only us, and the hum, and the reality of something I could no longer file under anomaly. Say it, I said, hoarse, not sure which sentence I meant. He didn't. Not immediately. He looked at me, the way men look after surviving a cliff they didn't intend to approach. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't anger. It was the recalibration that happens when the map realizes the mountain is in a different place. His thumb brushed my nape once. An inch of mercy, an inch of audacity, and then... He stepped back because the room needed us to prove we still knew how. Did you know? He asked again. But the question had changed shapes. It meant, did you know you could do that to me? It meant, are you a mirror or a match? If I had, I said, and almost laughed because humor was the only railing left, I would have charged admission. Silence widened just enough to hold both of us without spilling. I was shaking. It annoyed me. It also felt appropriate. The body keeps certain minutes in ink. He looked at my hands. He looked at the spot on his jaw where my mouth had written a thesis. He looked at me. You're not an omega, he said finally, voice low enough to belong to storms. You're a storm. He took one more breath and chose it. Not the instincts queuing up behind it. He reached for the linen on the tray, pressed it, gently, precisely, into my palm. My fingers folded around it like a truce learning to walk. And I don't want to be saved from you. Power likes theaters. The council chose a cathedral. The hall was a vault of old stone and older decisions, banners hanging like verdicts above a ring of polished tables. Every alpha carried their territory in their posture. I stood at Marcus's right shoulder, visible, deliberate, collared by nothing but attention. Finney waited beyond the doors like a grin you weren't supposed to notice. Item 3, intoned the clerk. The matter of the independent line Omega residing under the Vane Accord. A murmur. The sound of knives sheathed in politeness. He is too dangerous, said a woman whose hair was the color of stainless steel. Her voice had the discipline of a firing squad. Send him back to his clan, to be contained. Contained? Marcus asked mildly, as if testing the shape of the word with his tongue. He didn't sit. He never needed the chair. Your house is not a sanctum, the woman replied. It is decorous. We're speaking of public safety. Public safety always looks like a leash from the wrong angle, I said, before I could stop myself. My voice landed and made ripples I pretended not to see. You don't want me contained. You want me catalogued. Turned. Some faces registered interest. Others adopted the polite slackness reserved for messengers who bring inconvenient weather. Who are you to speak in our hall? A man demanded, every syllable oiled by dynasty. The subject, I said, an expert witness. The doors at the far end opened with less ceremony than they deserved, and she entered, Grace Hart. Tall, cool, cut from the same cloth as storms you see coming too late. Her suit was the color of thunderheads over water. Her eyes knew the value of things and the price of people. Marcus, she said, and used his name like a long memory. Hand him over. Good afternoon, Grace, Marcus replied. His voice wore civility like excellent armor. No, a susurrus against the stone. The clerk's pen paused, as if the ink had stage fright. Grace didn't bother with the council's choreography. She stepped into the circle meant for arguments and let her gaze rake me like she was measuring fabric. He belongs to his clan. Loans are complicated, I said. Read the fine print. Fine print, she repeated, amused. You smell like trouble dressed as a treaty. And you smell like a lawsuit, I said, smiling. Her focus sharpened. You have no idea how many people want what you are, which is precisely why you will not have him, Marcus said. He didn't raise his voice. He did not need to. The accord stands. My protection stands. Against the law? Grace asked softly. If the law has forgotten what it is for, Marcus said, then yes. You could feel the room react, to the audacity, to the shift where an alpha's posture stops being politics and starts being oath. The counselors looked to one another, tallying alliances, calculating headlines. Grace tipped her head, the smallest nod to a worthy opponent. Then she turned, and with that turn, the scene ended. The council dissolved like a wave collapsing back into sea. Threats went home to practice. Promises sharpened their teeth. On the steps outside, rain rehearsed again. Finney melted out of a column's shadow and offered me a lemon candy like it was a charm against bureaucracy. Your fan club is growing, he said. I prefer private concerts. Unpopular preference, he said, and flicked the candy into my pocket. Keep it, for blood sugar, or symbolism. The attack came the way night does in this city, sideways, and sooner than forecast. It began with the power dipping, just enough to make the chandeliers blink, enough to make staff look up from polished silver and ask the air whether it meant anything. Then the outer gate shuddered. Radios hissed. The fountain choked once, as if water could anticipate violence. Down, Marcus said, and the house obeyed. I caught the look he threw me, 1 second, a lifetime, before he was all command. Guards snapped into positions like pieces remembering their squares. Finney vanished without seeming to move. We took the under corridor, stone spine beneath the estate, built for moving quietly with purpose. Somewhere above us, boots scudded, a door slammed, a man shouted something that turned the hallway air thin. Marcus unlocked a wall panel and handed me a compact earpiece and a blade with no ornament. "Stay behind me," he said. "I don't do behind," I said, already slotting into parallel. He didn't argue. He adjusted. We surfaced near the east lawn. Night had set down fully, and with it, the geometry of the grounds redrew itself into hiding places and angles. Figures in matte black swept through hedges with the certainty of men who had trained on maps of this place. Grace's signature was absent, because of course it was. Good generals don't stand where the mess happens. The first clash was quiet and personal. Breath, palm, steel, breath. Marcus moved like the idea of force made flesh, efficient, relentless, not unkind. I kept close, reading the flow the way I read rooms, making small decisions fast. Two came at him from the blind side. I took one's wrist, turned it into gravity. The other reeled back at the sight of an omega not melting like the story promised. The surprise bought us seconds. Compound. North hedge, the radio whispered in Marcus's ear. Breach. We pivoted. Two more shadows fell in, and then out of the world. Above the house, the council's banners hung black in the night, forgetting their colors. The wolf fountain threw silver arcs that caught on boots and blades. They were here for me. I could feel it. The way a spotlight feels an actor before the actor bows. There's a moment when choosing stops, and something older chooses you. Trapped by choreography on all sides, I did the thing my blood had been practicing in a language I hadn't consented to learn. I let it speak. The hum that lives under the skin of men who led flared in my ribs like a chord struck on an instrument I'd denied owning. The world sharpened and slowed. Smells braided, iron, rain, adrenaline, sugar. I stepped into the open, lifted my chin, and let the voice that isn't a voice carry. Stop. It wasn't loud. It was shaped like command and warmed by something not cruelty. Instincts with their own old ears turned toward it. Two attackers froze mid-stride, surprise wrinkling their faces as their bodies negotiated with history. A third faltered, shook himself like a horse shaking off a hand, then stumbled anyway. My pulse boomed. Gold licked the edge of my sight. The lawn lights flared like witnesses. The power hurt. Not teeth-on-bone hurt, birth hurt. I tasted copper. Somewhere, someone dropped a weapon and stared at their empty hand like it had betrayed them. Back, I told them, and the word wrapped itself around spines and tugged. They retreated 3 steps in unison, confusion shadowing obedience. A shot cracked. Someone far enough away to believe rules don't apply at distance. Marcus moved before the thought finished forming. He took me sideways, the bullet hissing past to bury itself in stone. Pain broke across his shoulder a breath later from a second shot I hadn't heard fired. He didn't fall. Self between me and the rest of the night like a decision. Marcus. I'm fine, he said, and it was almost true. He bared his teeth at the dark, then at me. Stay with me. I wanted to be arrogant and immortal. Instead, I was efficient. I put my hands on him, quick pressure, a promise to see it later. Then I stepped forward again, because the only way out was through. The next command came from someplace that remembered torches and circles of stone. Drop. The word slid into ears and down to wrists. Weapons kissed grass. The men stared at their own compliance, horror dawning. I felt like a bell rung by a storm. My eyes burned. The world rimmed gold and narrowed to the work. Home, I said. And it wasn't exile. It was dismissal with mercy. They ran. Not all. Too many. Enough to count. Enough to call this a message. The grounds sighed. Radios breathed victory without celebration. Somewhere deeper in the garden, a body moaned, and a medic answered. The fountain kept pretending the world is always water. The gold drained out of my vision faster than it had risen. The power took a price I hadn't budgeted. My knees softened. The air became something I had to chew to keep. Marcus caught me before the stone did. He was warm and bleeding, and entirely himself. "You could have given me up," I said into his shoulder, more accusation than observation, more awe than either. The taste of iron was still on my tongue, but it wasn't his. "I could have," he said. His breath fogged the cold between us. "But I chose you." I laughed because the alternative was shaking apart. "That's terrible judgment." "It is," he said, and the sound he made might have been a laugh strangled gently by pain. He shifted, testing the wound like a man counting stairs in the dark. Then, with a formality he didn't bother to disguise, he dragged one arm under my knees and the other around my back and lifted. "Marcus," I said, "because my pride is a loud, loyal dog. I can walk." "I'm indulging myself," he said. "Don't ruin it." The estate exhaled as we crossed the threshold, the house recognizing its alpha the way old churches recognize prayers. Finney appeared at the end of the corridor with a first aid kit, a bloodless face, and a quip he swallowed when he saw me sag against Marcus's chest. Later, Marcus told him, and Finney nodded like a general receiving orders from a man carrying his own victory and his own ruin. We moved through the marble hush. The chandeliers recovered their courage, and the lights steadied. My head found the warm hollow below Marcus's collarbone. The scent of him, rain, wool, something I would never name out loud, threaded through the ache like an answer. He spoke into my hair, quiet enough that it belonged to us alone. "You're not my duty," he said. "You're my choice." The first thing I saw was light. Gentle, blurred, the color of morning tea left to steep too long. The second was Marcus. He sat beside the bed like someone pretending he hadn't spent the night there. His jacket was gone, shirt rolled at the sleeves, hair tousled in a way that betrayed both stress and humanhood. A faint cut traced his cheek, so clean it looked deliberate. "How long?" I rasped. He looked up, voice steady in a way his shoulders weren't. "A day." "You fainted before I could decide whether to yell or call a medic." "Yelling's cheaper," I said, and winced when my throat reminded me it had been busy shouting commands at fate. His mouth almost curved. "I don't yell." "Of course not," I murmured. "You issue decrees." He leaned back, relief flickering in his eyes like someone checking a candle still burns. Still arrogant. "Good." I sat up. My body disagreed with the concept of verticality, but dignity is a stubborn drug. The wound on his shoulder caught my eye. The bandage peeked out from under his shirt, red blooming through white. "You should be lying down." "I'm fine," he said, automatically. "So am I," I said, less convincingly. We stared at each other, a draw neither of us cared to break. The door cracked open. Finney entered carrying a tray like a man walking into gossip. Steam curled from 2 cups, a plate of toast, and an expression too bright for the room's tension. "Well," he said, setting the tray down, "you two look like cats who pretend they're not sleeping in the same sunbeam." "Finney," Marcus warned. "Just saying," Finney said, unbothered. "Some of us have to use humor to process trauma. Others just sit in chairs for 12 hours and glower romantically." "Get out," Marcus said, but there was no heat in it. "I will," Finney replied, already halfway to the door. "After I deliver tea and unsolicited wisdom. Drink, talk, don't kill each other, and maybe, just maybe, smile once before noon." He vanished like punctuation, leaving citrus and mischief in the air. Marcus handed me a cup. His fingers brushed mine, and that small contact carried more than most sentences. "You should eat," he said. "You should rest," I countered. We compromised by sitting in silence, drinking tea. The house outside hummed with recovery, footsteps, muted orders. The quiet grief of furniture moved back to its rightful place. Rain washed the windows clean of last night's blood and brilliance. How bad? I asked finally. Minor injuries, he said. 2 concussions, 1 fractured arm. The rest, rattled. He paused. You saved them. You stopped them. I looked down at my hands, still stained at the edges, still foreign. I don't remember all of it. Just the feeling. Like something was borrowing my bones to speak. It was you, he said, and there was no fear in it. All of it. Then why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Because I have, he said softly, and I like him. I almost laughed. Flattery, Mr. Vane. Dangerous habit. I'm past danger, he said, setting his cup down. Sit with me in the garden later. I need to remember what peace looks like. The garden was patient enough to pretend nothing had happened. Morning sunlight pooled in the wet grass, the fountain whispered nonsense to the air. And Finney had strung a line of laundry across one hedge just to ruin the aesthetic. I sat on the bench, a blanket over my knees, and Marcus brought coffee despite claiming he didn't drink it. We watched the clouds drift, both pretending we didn't notice how close our shoulders were. Your council friends? I asked. Quiet, he said. For now. And Grace Hart? She sent flowers, he said dryly. I smiled into my cup. How thoughtful. They're poisonous, he added. Appropriate. A pause, comfortable this time. The kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. He turned slightly, studying me the way he might study a map whose routes had changed overnight. Liam, he said. And something in the way he said my name made the air lean closer. I don't want you to stay because of the contract. I met his gaze. Then why? Because I want you to choose it. His tone was steady, but the edges trembled just enough to make it human. Stay because you want to, not because anyone ordered it. I let that sink in. The garden shimmered faintly, the fountain's rhythm soft as a heartbeat. Finally I said, all right, but no bars, no cameras, no chains. He smiled then. Small. Real. Agreed. Good, I said, leaning back, because I'd break them anyway. He laughed, low and warm, a sound I wanted to keep in a jar for the bad days. For the first time, the world around us didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a possibility. Finney's voice floated from the veranda. Well, progress. Emotional breakthroughs before breakfast. I'll alert the press. Go away, Finney, we said in unison, and that made Marcus actually laugh. When the noise faded, we sat there with the sun climbing higher and the scent of rain still clinging to everything. His hand brushed the back of mine, hesitant, deliberate, as if asking permission without words. I didn't pull away. We stayed that way for a while, just breathing, just existing without audience or war. When he finally rose to leave for the endless duties of men who rule, he touched my shoulder gently. Rest, he said. You've earned a quiet day. Tell the world, I said. I just did, he murmured, and walked back toward the house. I watched him go. The man who'd once been all control and distance, now softened by something he didn't try to name. And when the door closed behind him, I smiled, thinking, he stopped being an alpha the moment he asked instead of commanded. The year died softly. Snow came the way forgiveness does. Quiet, persistent, unasked for. It padded the steps of the estate, blurred the fountain's edges, turned the stone wolves into patient ghosts. Inside, the world was boxes and folded shirts, the scent of cedar and inevitable departure. My room looked smaller without my life scattered in it. The walls had learned my habits. The air still carried the faint trace of tea and midnight arguments. Finney stood by the bed, arms full of books, unusually silent. You're forgetting this one, he said, holding up a volume I'd pretended not to finish. I was hoping you'd steal it, I said. You'd give it more attention. He set it gently on the pile. You don't make it easy to joke today. Then don't, I said, trying for lightness and missing. Take the day off. He looked at me then, no smirk, no commentary, just the steadiness of someone who'd stopped pretending. I'll miss the chaos, he said. The house gets boring when it's only full of obedience. I smiled. Then you're in luck. I'm leaving enough disobedience in the walls to last you another year. He exhaled, half laugh, half grief. Don't wait too long to come back. Who said I would? We both knew the truth sat somewhere between those words. The hall was too grand for goodbyes. Its marble and echo demanded ceremony, and I had none left to give. Marcus waited by the door, coat dark against the light. Snow caught in his hair, melted down his collar, glittered like something foolishly romantic. He didn't speak when I stopped a few steps away. I didn't either. Words, for once, felt unworthy of translation. He broke the silence first. If you decide to return, he said quietly, the light will be on. Not a command, not a plea, just a statement carved into the air like a promise that knew it might have to wait. I nodded, throat unhelpfully tight. That's inefficient. You'll waste electricity. I can afford it. We looked at each other too long and too honestly. Then I did the only thing I could do. Turned, shouldered my bag, and walked out into the snow. The gates opened with a whisper, the kind machines make when they've witnessed too much human behavior to judge it anymore. Each step sank into white silence. Behind me, the light from the doorway spilled across the drive, a small, golden defiance against the gray. It didn't feel like exile. It felt like breathing outside after a long room. You're free now, I told myself. And for once, it didn't sound like an apology. The city waited beyond the trees, its skyline softened by snow. Freedom didn't roar, it exhaled. My heart matched it beat for beat. Morning came reluctantly, blue-edged and pale. The streets glittered. I stood outside the gate again, cold biting through the fabric of indecision. Freedom, it turned out, was overrated when you had no one to share the coffee with. I knocked. The door opened before I could second-guess the universe. Marcus stood there, sleeves rolled, hair damp from an argument with the shower, expression unreadable. Forgot something? He asked. Several things, I said, brushing snow from my coat. Starting with your coffee-making skills. His eyebrow lifted. What about them? They don't exist, I said, stepping past him into the warmth. Without me, your pack will die of caffeine deficiency. Tragic, really. He laughed then. A real one, unguarded and startled. The sound hit the hall like spring finding a crack in winter. Welcome home, he said. I'll decide if it still qualifies as one, I replied. But I was smiling when I said it. Epilogue. Voice of blood. Morning light again. This time it stays. The kitchen smells of coffee and rain-warmed stone. Marcus is at the counter, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed like a man solving a moral crisis disguised as a frying pan. I'm leaning against the table, pretending I'm not enjoying watching him lose to breakfast. Too much salt, I say. He doesn't look up. It's sugar. Exactly. Finney strolls in, perfectly awake, perfectly amused. Domesticity looks good on you, he says, stealing a slice of toast from my plate. Almost makes me believe in redemption arcs. Get out, Marcus mutters. I live here, Finney says cheerfully. And for the record, the score's 1-0 in favor of the Omega. Marcus glances at me. He's keeping score? Of course, Finney says. Someone has to record history accurately. I roll my eyes. Breakfast first, revolutions later. Marcus hands me a cup of coffee. Our fingers brush, neither of us pulls away. The moment is small, human, quietly impossible. In the window's reflection, I catch it, the faint mark at the edge of his jaw, mirrored by the one on my neck. Not a brand, not a chain, just symmetry. Made visible. Finney hums as he leaves, muttering something about needing stronger locks for privacy. The door swings shut behind him, and the kitchen settles into peace. Marcus leans against the counter, studying me with that same steady focus that once felt like interrogation and now feels like understanding. "You're smiling," he says. "Habit," I reply. He crosses the room and stops close enough that our reflections line up in the glass. For a heartbeat, the world is two silhouettes and one pulse. "Say it," he murmurs. "What?" "Whatever it is you're thinking." I take a slow sip of coffee and let the warmth do the talking. "They say blood calls," I say at last. "But I don't think it's the blood." He raises an eyebrow. "No? No," I whisper. "It's just the heart, remembering who it beats with."